Hello everyone, and welcome back to Viewer's Choice. My name is Caleb Denby, and I'm filling in tonight for Amon Hamilton, who's out doing some very important fundraising for the club. So tonight we've got a few games planned to go over. This first one here is from someone called Fabian Otte, who is from Germany. He is 20 years old and about 1240, but he hasn't played that much over the board chess, according to this note here. And it looks like we're looking at a chess.com correspondence game that he managed to win with the black pieces. Despite winning, he's not sure how he played in the late opening or middle early game. So that's what we're going to take a look at. He said it would be very nice if a GM could analyze it, but I'm the next best thing that the club has to offer. So let's get going. So it starts off 1d4. Like he said, it's a King's Indian. You see knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, and f3. So do you know what opening line this is?
King's Indian?
So yeah, it's a line in the King's Indian, but this is actually the Saemisch defense with f3. So white is saying, okay, I know what black's common plans are. Usually black in this opening plays something like f5 and attacks this e4 pawn later on. Have you seen that before? Yeah, so white's saying, oh, whoops, that's not what black is saying. White is saying, okay, I know you're going to attack this pawn. I'm going to support it with f3 right away. But black isn't phased. Black just castles. Bishop d3 gets played. Black breaks with e5, which is the common break. Here, white actually takes on e5, and black takes on e5. What do you think about this one, this capture on e5 for white? Good move or bad move?
Well, black's advantage was that, that he gets the open file, but white's advantage, I think, is worse, which is the pawn on e5 gets kind of weak.
Okay.
If black gets to play, develops his pieces,
Mhm.
moves his knight from f6, and he can play something like f5. So I think it might not be good for white.
Might not be good for white. So a lot of what you just said is pretty correct. So white's forcing black to have this e pawn kind of stuck on e5, right? And it's going to be a little bit weaker now if black tries to go for this f5 stuff. But of course, the big thing that you mentioned first is that this d file gets opened, right? So what that means is usually, some pieces are probably going to get traded along this file. White might try to use this d5 square for a knight, but fortunately for black, he still has this c6 move whenever he needs to control d5. So this line usually isn't seen as playing for too much of an advantage, if I understand my King's Indian stuff correctly, from the white point of view. So white simply just developed with bishop e3, going from here. And black should be fine. He just develops his pieces as well. Knight to c6 is kind of interesting, actually. Because like I said, it is kind of important that black has an answer to this knight d5 move, right? And now that the knight is on c6, it's kind of blocking its own pawn, right? I don't know if that's too apparent, but yeah, now something like knight d5, maybe not right away, but later on could be kind of nasty for black with something like bishop c5 coming, attacking the rook maybe, or bishop g5 pinning this knight. Either way, d5 is a great square, and you want to be sure that you can play c6 eventually to kick the knight out. But instead we saw a3, so white just wanted to keep this knight out of b4, which makes some sense. a5 was played, maybe preventing white from pushing a4, or b4 rather, which makes some sense. B3. This move's a little dubious, I think, but I'm sure it's fine. It's always just it makes me anxious when moves like b3 get played with this fianchetto bishop, and right now it's kind of clear that this pawn is in the way of any of those ideas. But later on, maybe we'll see some tactics where the pawn ends up getting moved. Of course.
So you could play f5 and if the pawns get if he
Mm-hmm.
gets e takes f5, there might be some e4.
Yeah, there might be, just as an example of how, one way this might get opened up. Somehow maybe white might have to take here, and then, after something like e4, this diagonal would be pretty weak. So you just have to be cautious when you play moves like b3 against a fianchetted bishop. One other thing that might happen is this knight might move over to h5 and try to come into f4. And now white would like to take this knight, or be able to take this knight, but then again, this would be opening up this bishop, right? So you'd have to be a little bit more careful now. So b3 is not a move you really love to see as the white player, but maybe, as the black player, Fabian was very happy to see this. He just developed his pieces, which makes a lot of sense. I would have liked this knight h5 move as well, but it's hard to argue against getting your pieces out. Then white continued with rook to b1, so he's really trying to push this b4 breakthrough, which that kind of explains why he played b3, because maybe he's seen some games where this pawn gets pushed to a4, right, and then that kind of stops b4 forever because of en passant.
Isn't the pawn on a4 also ended?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So even though white was afraid of that, he really had no cause to be, because he could just move his rook over. And black really wouldn't want to play a4, because you could just take it, and then b4 would come through anyways, right? So b3 isn't really a great move. Bishop e6, again, just developing your pieces, it's always good. Rook to b1 is played. And now knight to e8. So this is a move I'm not a huge fan of. What do you think I would have liked from black instead? Or what do you like from black instead of knight e8? Mm-hmm.
So what I think he should do is go knight h5 to f4.
Yeah, that's right. This idea that we just looked at with knight h5 and now coming into f4 could be quite strong, right?
Because if black, that knight's annoying because it's not that easy to, you have to play something like queen e2 or queen c2, and your queens are not good. Or it's not.
Yeah, so like you said, this knight's going to be annoying, and if white tries something like g3, that's actually going to be pretty weakening, right? It's going to weaken all these light squares around his king.
And now it's almost like a hook, so you could play f5, f4.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of a hook. F4 can now be, can now capture this pawn on g3 when it comes eventually. So knight h5 might have posed some really serious problems for white, right? And knight e8 is kind of a similar idea. He still wants to play this f5, f4, but it's not nearly as strong as putting the knight on h5, in my opinion. White continued with knight to e2. He's just developing naturally. F5 is played. Queen c2, so he just continues development. It looks like the viewer inputted a line here with e takes and g takes. Castles, knight f6, and queen c2. And yeah, I don't know so much about this line for white. I think I like the way that white played better because, like I said, now that he's really weakened this dark squared diagonal, you've got to be absolutely certain you can keep control of e4 after you capture on f5. So that would be, kind of risking a lot for white, because if black ever gets this e4 move in, it's going to be big trouble for white, because this bishop's just going to, shine through. So that's why instead we saw queen c2. But now simply f4, bishop f2, king h8 was played. And
Wasn't that to play rook g8? Wasn't king h8 to play rook g8?
yeah, so the idea might be to bring this rook over, bring this bishop back, and then push through, right? It's kind of a common idea in the King's Indian. But yeah, it looks like, this queen g5, there's a note written in Spanish, which I don't speak a great deal of, but I do know that it says very interesting, because now white has to decide something, if I understand these words correctly. So yeah, how does white want to defend this pawn? It's actually not so easy to tell. Looks like the choices the viewer gave were king f1 or g3. So yeah, what would happen on castles? Something pretty nasty happens right away. Yeah, just bishop h3, right? And this would just be totally crushing. Yeah, I mean, you have to stop mate somehow. There's really no way to do it besides moving the pawn. and then this is hanging, and then this is opening, and then this is hanging. So that wouldn't be great. That wouldn't be great. So yeah, maybe queen g5 is quite good. I'm not sure what else white can actually try here. Because, I mean, king f1 looks like the only idea. What's wrong with rook g1? Maybe still this bishop h3 idea.
Wait, isn't my rook defended?
Oh, I guess it is. You're right. Sorry. Let's see. I guess rook g1 is playable, but you know, you really don't want to be giving up castling rights in this manner, right? It's almost like, would you rather have the king on e1 or f1 if you're not going to castle? And I think f1 is just better. But yeah, this is another way for white to play. And maybe then he can try g3 and g takes f, actually. It'd be kind of interesting. Yeah, I'm not so sure how black would want to deal with this right away. See, all right, I've got my chat up here now. I don't know if the chat has any ideas, but yeah, maybe black would just retreat, like in the other line. Simply like queen e7, and then continuing with the pawn breaks. Could be interesting. But yeah, this queen g5 move might have been very good, because you know, forcing white to give up castling rights is always strong. Instead, we saw king h8 in the game. White continued knight d5, so yeah, this square is important, like I mentioned, and black would love to be able to play this. So maybe that's why I would have rather seen this knight go to d7 earlier. Just kind of a minor thing, just to give you the extra option here.
And the knight's not, like on d7, has ideas to go to c5 maybe?
Yeah, on d7, maybe you come into c5 later on, after you kind of reposition your pieces. Black wasn't phased, though, by this knight on d5. He just continued with g5, trying to get g4 in. White decided he wanted to try to stop this, which is why he played h3, and now h5. Yeah, I don't think I can translate this sentence over from Spanish. I'm doing my best, but I don't really know what the viewer was saying here. Probably this was left for Pepe. But okay, so h5. Obviously, the idea is he wants to get g4 in. You know, he doesn't have much choice here, in my opinion. But the thing is, with white uncastled, g4 might do more harm than good, right? So let's quickly see how this continued on here. He played queen c3, and now I guess black kind of realized opening up this h file isn't really in his best interest, right? Not with this king on it. So maybe that's another reason why king h8 might not be the greatest move ever. So here, instead we saw b6. I don't know about this move. It doesn't really seem to do a whole lot, right?
Well, e5 pawn's already defended twice, so...
Yeah, a5 was doing fine. And yeah, yeah, but you can already move the c6 knight, right? You don't really have to be worried about that. You can go to e7 if you want. And maybe this is a maneuver I would have liked to see, either knight e7 or knight d4. If knight e7, maybe. I'm not sure how white wants to continue here.
Maybe...
I guess bishop c5 might be a problem. Maybe this is what black was actually afraid of. Well, yeah,
Can we do exchange?
this could be problematic.
Oh, actually, I wanted to get my knight to e3.
Yeah, the problem with takes on d5 is white simply recaptures on d5, right?
Oh, I thought like I could maybe do exchange.
Well, yeah, but you have better than an exchange sack if he takes here, right? You can just take the queen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so, maybe that's what black was afraid of, actually. But, this knight d4 move might actually be fine as well. The knight takes, the pawn takes, the bishop takes, and now c6. This is the line the viewer put in. See bishop g7, knight g7. This all looks reasonable to me. And then I guess this knight is actually stuck. Wow, who would have guessed that this knight has no squares? So yeah, that's another reason why this This idea with the knight being on c6, maybe jumping into d4, it's kind of interesting, but blocking in the c pawn does have its definite downsides, right? So, okay. Regardless, we saw b6. Knight d4 might have just won the game because of this idea. I guess, then white can't actually capture. He has to make a square for his knight, maybe with like queen to d2. Yeah, so takes. Whoops. Takes. And then this c6 move seems to trap the knight, right? You can try jumping here, but I think actually I can just take this piece. Takes on c3. Yeah. So okay, maybe knight d4 was a miss, but that's kind of a complicated tactic. You can't really blame the guy for not finding that one right away. b6, I guess, seems reasonable if you're thinking of rerouting the knight in this direction and you're worried about bishop c5. Here, bishop c2 was played. Maybe he's preparing to, I don't know, either play b4 or move this rook over to d1, which I think would be the best square for it. We see knight f6, and now white plays g4. My goodness. It's kind of a crazy move, right? What are your first thoughts on g4?
I think he was trying to open the H file, but I guess that.
Yeah, so he's trying to lock it down, right? He's either trying to only open the H file after H takes. This would be advantageous for white, obviously, because he's already got a rook there. Or he just wants to shut down the king side completely with h4, which also makes some sense for him. So he doesn't have to worry about the king side. He can just continue with this plan of b4 and use this strong knight on d5 to his advantage.
Probably going to be like better or something.
Yeah, I think so. But unfortunately for black, trickiest rule in chess, what can black play? Yeah, en passant, obviously, right? So f takes g3. And this gives white some serious problems, right? It's opening up this rook. It's weakening both of these pawns. This pawn's under attack. It's really, really not great. Whoops, press the Windows key. All right, it's really, really not great for white. So yeah, I'd say that after g4, black is probably just winning. Let's see how it continued, though. So bishop takes g3. Let's see, black went knight h7. Not sure this is the greatest square for the knight, but maybe. Yeah, I think he just wanted to open up this rook, and maybe knight g5 later on, but. I might have liked to see h4. What do you think, the idea might be here? Oh, well, I guess actually there's another point to knight h7, and that's this pawn is hanging. So valid points again, but maybe I can just take this. It's not so clear to me what's going on here, right?
There's no takes on d5. Is there, some problem because wasn't
Yeah, like takes on d5 and knight e3 might be good, right? Something has to happen with this bishop. You have to defend it, I guess, right? You have to play like rook c1.
play bishop d1.
Yeah, bishop d1, I guess, is an option, but I'm kind of crashing through now, right?
So rook c1, rook takes f3 happens too?
Yeah, I would play rook f3 anyways, and I'm actually threatening checkmate here, so
Wait.
I'm really not sure what white would do about this.
Checkmate on these knights? Oh yeah, knight g2.
Yeah, knight g2 would be mate. Yeah, so I don't think, white could take this pawn if this were to be played. So something like bishop f2 maybe. And then, I would just continue with knight h5. Again, this knight h5 to f4 idea is super common in these structures. And it's, I think it would be a really great way for black to continue here, rather than bringing the knight all the way to h7, right? So yeah, this is an idea that's you always want to be on the lookout for in these structures, is bringing this knight into f4.
What if the knight took on g3 instead of the bishop?
What line?
After en passant, knight captures g3 instead of bishop.
Okay. So yeah, knight takes g3. Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it, per se. Maybe still just h5? Or h4, rather. Do you want to come up here? There's really no difference if you're coming back to e2 anyways, right? So knight f5 would be the only reason.
Knight takes f6.
Okay. Why do you want to throw this in? This is your best piece, right?
I feel like it.
I don't think you want to give up this piece. It's your best piece, right?
But then can you get knight to h5 after?
Oh, okay. So you want to take and play knight h5? But, I mean, you're kind of hanging this pawn if you're not careful. Maybe knight f5 now?
Wait, doesn't that help? If we play knight f5, doesn't that help? Like, because doesn't he get the e file? Or he doesn't get it, but can he open it? Like,
Yeah, I mean, maybe just takes, and black can say this structure is really bad for you, right? And your king's still in the center, you're going to have some serious problems. Yeah, I don't know. Probably just back would be best for white.
isn't it the same position?
Yeah, I mean, then it's the same, and still knight h5 is coming. Like I said, I think this is just very good for black, because g4 is really not a great move. But, okay, in the game, we saw knight h7, opening up this rook. H4 was played, so white might have noticed that h4 attacking the bishop was slightly awkward. But unfortunately, this does allow g4. So black continues to just kind of open it up where he has more space, while the white king is in the center, which makes perfect sense. So we saw f4 here. E takes f4 was played, which of course this just looks like a blunder right off the bat. Okay, I skipped a bit, sorry. But yeah, f4 just looks like a blunder, right? This is just a one-move tactic.
Doesn't it lose a piece after f4?
Yeah, I mean, white just loses a piece. So maybe f takes g would have kept the game going on a bit longer, but like I said, this is going to be very tough for white. His king is just honestly stuck. Knight d4 is probably coming, and that's probably going to be somewhat devastating if he can get it in. There are bishop e5 tactics to look out for, but knight takes c2 might be in. I don't know, it's complicated, but yeah, I don't know. Just this king in the center is going to make white's life really difficult. But yeah, in the game we saw f4, and this just hangs a piece. After knight g3, we saw knight e5, queen e3, rook f3, queen g1, knight f6, bishop d1. Okay, so you can't take this rook because of knight takes d3, or knight takes f3. And yeah, I mean, white's just getting crushed here. Oh, so the rook was actually taken. And then I guess white resigned here. Obviously, the king moves and the queen is hanging. So yeah, that was a pretty well-played game from Fabian. Honestly, the only comments I would have are, one, maybe be careful about putting this knight on c6. I guess there are some pretty strong ideas with putting it onto d4, but having the c-pawn be mobile is also very nice, having c6 available. And then the other thing is, this knight h5 idea is usually better than knight e8 or knight d7. When you have the choice to come into f4, it's usually the right idea. Which is why a lot of the times you'll see in this opening, this bishop gets put onto e2. This is like the classical main line. And then this knight actually drops back to e1 here. And this is actually mainly to stop this knight coming from h5, right? So, this is a really good idea, knight h5. It's definitely something you want to be paying attention to in your games. With that said, thanks for sending this in. Sorry I didn't understand the Spanish comments, and Pepe didn't get a chance to look at it. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next game, unless there are any questions about this one. No? All right. Let's do it. So this next game looks like it's from Davit. He didn't leave us too many comments. But yeah, let's take a look. So the game started e4, d5, so we have a Scandinavian. E takes d5, knight f6. So black doesn't actually capture the pawn back right away. which I guess is an interesting line. I don't know a great deal about it. All I know is that this c4 move from white is usually pretty bad, trying to hang on to the pawn.
Isn't the main line D4?
Yeah, I think d4 is the main line. And then, like you said, then if the knight takes, now we can bring this pawn up to c4, right? And it's kind of with tempo. And white gets to build a nice little center while black is moving the knight around. In the game, we saw knight to c3, which is not a move I'm deeply familiar with. I'm sure it's not terrible, though. The knight took on d5, and then we saw knight takes d5. So this is kind of an unnecessary trade, in my opinion. I don't think white should play like this necessarily, because usually in openings like the Scandinavian, what kind of structures do you get in the center? You know, who has more central space? Yeah, white usually gets more space in the Scandi, right? You know, black gives up this center pawn, usually, and, you know, like this line we just looked at, you know, white gets to build a nice center. He has plenty of space back here. And then eventually, let's just play some moves, not saying they're great. You know, black's going to have less space to work with for his pieces, right? He's only going to have these 4 squares pretty much in the back rank. So what should happen in games where you have less space? What do you want to do? Yeah, so when you have less space, yeah, you want to trade off some minor pieces, right? Because if you have less pieces, then it's less awkward for them to maneuver in their space. So already, you know, trading off these knights is kind of a victory for black, because, you know, it's one less piece he has to worry about in his limited space. We saw queen takes d5, and now knight f3. So white's really delaying playing e4 here, and I'm not sure it's the greatest idea for him. Already, as black, I would be tempted to play something like e5 here. You know, just taking the central space that white isn't taking. And that's a very common idea that you see in a lot of, you know, lower rated games is when one player doesn't take the center space, very often, you know, the other player should, you know, make his own claim in the center. Yeah, what's up, Ben?
Do we know which color Davit is?
No. He is asking us from the white point of view, though, about the bishop takes f7 move. So if I had to guess, I would say he's playing with the white pieces. Yeah, when you guys do send in games, be sure to leave us a few notes about, you know, which side you're playing, you know, where you're talking to us from, you know, like that Fabian guy. You did a great job. We learned all about him. But yeah, so this is an idea to look out for, is you definitely want to grab the center space while you can, which is why as white, you know, I really think the best move here would have been to play something like d4. Or even, yeah, I don't know. I think d4 might have been the best move. Instead, we saw knight f3, and then black actually just plays knight c6. So he's still not taking the center space. And once again, I really would have liked to see d4 here. Just preventing black from playing e5, from taking this space. I guess, you know, bishop g4 might be slightly awkward. You can play bishop e2, though, and, you know, c3 to follow to, you know, maintain this central pawn. There's no tactics here with taking on d4, because white always has bishop takes c6. So yeah, you really do want to grab this central space. That's the main idea that's, you know, being avoided here. Instead, we saw b3. So white's going to try to, you know, control the center with his bishop, which is another way to go about things, but I always prefer the classical, you know, control the center with your pawns way of playing, especially at lower level games. We saw bishop f5, simply developing. Bishop c4, gaining time on the queen, which is nice. Queen to d6. d3 now. So this move doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Yeah, what do you guys think about this one? Yeah, it's kind of blocking the bishop out of its own squares. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say.
Yeah, you know, the bishop's stuck out here, right?
Yeah, cause like if like white gets his somehow his knight to b5, there's a6 b4.
Yeah, so a6 b5 might come down the board.
I don't know what else it looks like if the bishop g5 later. The b2 square is already open for your bishop.
Yeah,
So
and
you don't need to make more.
and so that's the other thing, is moving both of these pawns really weakens these dark squares, right? You know, these are squares that, you know, pawns can never really defend from the white point of view again. So you're going to run into trouble, you know, all along these dark squares if you don't, you know, be very, very careful. So moving this d pawn doesn't make a whole lot of sense here. If you are going to move this pawn, move it to d4, right? I mean, it's a bit too late now. Probably this pawn would end up being weak. But yeah, I totally don't think moving the d pawn is correct here. Probably just developing the bishop at this point would make the most classical sense. Instead, okay, we saw d3. Now black finally takes the central space. He finally plays e5. So happy to see that move. White castled, black castled queenside, which makes a lot of sense. And now bishop g5 is played. b5 wins, according to Jonathan. Does it? Oh, yeah, so b5, there's actually already a tactic here. So yeah, b5 exclam, and then you know, if white were to take, of course, what's the tactic? Yeah.
Queen b4, and I feel like Pepe once showed this something like this.
Yeah, maybe you showed something like this. Hopefully, we didn't repeat anything.
Well, I remember like that person from the I remember Pepe like talking about him or something.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, but okay, we'll take a look at this.
What happened if you didn't play d3?
So yeah, okay. So bishop b, yeah, obviously queen b4 is the idea. And now if bishop d2, queen takes b5. And this would be problematic. Bishop takes f7 has been suggested. What's that looking like? It's still just looking like black's up a piece, unfortunately. Taking f7 pawns is fun in Bughouse. In real games, it usually doesn't work as well when you're sacrificing a full piece. You can give one check, but the king will run away. Maybe to, let's see, which square do you guys like, e8 or g8? Yeah, let's go to e8 maybe. Queen h5 doesn't really do anything. Queen f3, maybe I can just move this bishop somewhere. Maybe I can just play queen f6. And maybe just queen f6. This just looks fine for black, I think, right? But okay, b5 was missed. Obviously, this makes d3 a terrible, terrible, terrible move. And yeah, bishop b2 would have just been better. It's like I said, though, you know, once these dark squares are weak, there's definite problems that show up. So, okay, let's take a look at the game, though. Black missed this, played e5, which, while he missed the tactical win, you know, good for him, finally seizing the center. White got his king out of the center, finally. Black did as well. And now, yeah, bishop g5 was played. And this move doesn't look so great, right? Yeah, what do you think about that? Yeah.
I don't like it because like he's probably supposed to like pawn sword because your kings are on opposite sides.
Okay.
Well, he should probably play something like bishop e3 because the bishop on e3 is pointing towards the king side, and then he might start his pawn storm.
Yeah, okay.
And bishop g5, it just helps black.
Yeah, because, you know, he can play like f6, right?
Yeah, so like there's no point of bishop g5. Right?
Yeah, I'm on board with you, kind of. So you mentioned you'd rather put this bishop somewhere like e3, maybe, where it can support the queenside pawn storm. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense, you know, positionally. Definitely, I might just start with a4 if we were talking like purely positional. What's the best way to start the attack? Maybe just a4. But it looks like there are actually some tactical opportunities for white here. So what do you think he can try?
What tactic here?
Yeah, use some opportunities. I'm not sure if they're directly winning, but definitely has some choices here that he might not have considered.
Good thing I didn't see the location.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I don't know. YouTube chat has any ideas?
Maybe I could try that. Oh yeah, that's one. Bishop takes f7.
Yeah, so that's one choice, is just taking this pawn, right?
For a second, I thought bishop b5 but
Mhm.
now I see there's a6 b5. What is it? Because I have bishop c4 back.
So yeah, the only problem with this line is you don't get to play two moves in a row, right? So black can maybe just move this knight out of the way.
Can he play a6? No, no.
Well, a6 you would just take the knight, right?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, just knight d4 I think is fine. So yeah, bishop takes f7 is one idea. And this would be kind of an ambitious try from white.
Might not be good because it opens the f line.
Well, it opens the f file. That's not the main concern, I think. The main concern is, it's just kind of bringing this bishop further, away from home. And, where there are loose pieces, there's sometimes tactics. So maybe already black could do something like queen f6.
Yeah, queen f6.
After bishop c4, maybe something like bishop g4, right?
Can you play
Can you
e4?
play e4?
Oh yeah, I think I remember this tactic. Like this was a class here.
Oh, yeah.
Was
So,
the first
yeah,
class.
something like e4 could happen, right?
I remember there was a lot of people came to this first class.
All right.
And then I think Davit he said queen f6 or something.
Yeah, no, so yeah, this queen f6 move actually looks quite good with e4.
Oh wait, e4, bishop g5.
I don't know. Do I believe it? Do I believe it? Let's see. Maybe I do believe it.
There's no two pieces. So you can't get two pieces for it.
Well, actually, I think I can just play queen g6, right? And now if you were to take here, maybe I can take on f3.
Oh yeah, I'm threatening mate and then I'm going to take
Yes, you would have to take back because of the mate threat on g2. And then I can take this bishop. So this looks pretty good for black, I think.
two pieces. Seems pretty good. But the pieces are coordinated. It's not a bad thing.
The pieces are pretty coordinated, right? This bishop's out, and this bishop isn't out yet, but it's going to have a great square to come to on d6.
I don't like the knight.
So it can come to f8.
I don't really like the knight.
Yeah, maybe the knight's not doing its best job, but I mean, the white pieces aren't doing great either, if we take a look.
Isn't b7 weaker now? Can that become a target?
I mean, first of all, it's defended by the knight for the moment. And we can also just bring this pawn to c6 if need be. And I mean, there are definitely open files in front of the white king. I think I definitely would take black here. For example, I don't know, what move do you want to play as white here, first of all? Like just rook e1? If you had to play a move, which quite often in chess you do have to play moves. Let's take a look at rook e1. So I'm just going to develop naturally with bishop d6.
Maybe double on the
Yeah,
e5.
rook e3.
Okay, rook e3. I'll just play rook f8. And all of a sudden my pieces are kind of starting to come together, right? Yeah, so you have to move the queen somewhere, right? Otherwise I'm going to take on d3.
But if you take on d3, there's queen h3 check.
Bishop back to f5 though.
Queen e2. I want to triple on the e5.
Yes, sure, you can play queen e2. I might make some threats here. I haven't decided threats of which kind, but I don't know.
5h4 h3.
Well, even faster than that, maybe. I can play something like bishop f4 if I want.
Oh yeah, that's
You might have to come up to e7. I might just play knight c6, and maybe your rook's already trapped.
it is. Is it?
No.
You can
Bishop check.
you can check me. I might run away.
And
Bishop takes.
f5 yes.
Saves your rook, right?
Yeah, okay. Maybe you get away.
Oh,
Just
maybe?
this once.
Wait,
Just
I
this
think I
once.
see a mate. Can you go back?
Rook.
Rook e8.
Yeah, rook e8 check.
Knight b8. But you can play knight b8.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's not checkmate. Maybe this line isn't the greatest way for black to try. I don't think knight c6 is correct here. But I don't know. Even, for example, something like, let's see, bishop g4 even. Yeah, okay, I'll say bishop g4. You might do queen e4 maybe. Right? Any objections? All right, queen e4. And I'll go ahead and play something like queen f6. Since, once again, like your pieces they don't have a lot of squares to go to, and your king's going to be weak forever, right? With the two bishops, definitely black's going to be preferred in this position. But okay, that was a bit of a tangent. So maybe bishop takes f7 isn't great. Another move to look at here would actually be knight g5, I think. This was also suggested by, the viewer. Yeah, I mean, if you play bishop b6, like, I'm just going to capture this, right? And put more pressure on the pawn. Yeah, white has the bishop pair and pressure on these weak double pawns. I think this should be fine. You can play something like knight to d4. I might actually just ignore this and play bishop b2. If you take here, I might throw in a check and then play rook c8, or rook c1 rather. And I don't know. I think this would be fine for white. Something about the bishop pair in these open positions is always, advantageous. So instead of all that, we actually saw bishop g5 get played, as we first said. So something like f6 might happen, or did happen actually, just blocking off this bishop. The bishop retreats to h4, which again, this is really just helping black storm kind of the king's side. Of course, the bishop should come back maybe to d2, maybe to e3. I might like e3 more. I might like d2 more. I'm undecided. Either way, either of those scores is much better than h4. So then g5 comes on, bishop back to g3, and of course h5. So black's just going to storm the king's side now, and white's probably going to end up checkmated. h3 got played.
Wait, are you saying white's going to? Oh, I thought you're.
Yeah, white's going to get checkmated, right?
I thought you said, white's going to be checkmated.
Yeah, no, he's checkmated, not checkmating. So white played h3 here, which you almost never want to move pawns on the same side of the board where you're being attacked. But his bishop was, threatening to be trapped.
And h3 is a hook.
Yeah, it's a hook for black. But maybe white actually had a better way to try to save his bishop. What do you think?
h4 doesn't seem too good because g5.
No, actually, I think h4 is pretty nice. And the reason is, if you do want to take and open it up, first of all, I have a nice square for my bishop attacking this pawn. It also stops this h-pawn in its tracks, kind of. And I can maybe play something like g3 to help just cement down the position on the dark squares. Probably I would first want to make sure my knight doesn't get pinned too badly. Maybe bishop g4, for example, is actually pretty good for white, or pretty good for black right off the bat. But yeah, I definitely would have preferred h4 over h3. Because after something like g4, once this h-file opens up, white's going to be in a lot of trouble. The bishop came back to d7. The knight jumps into g6, but the rook simply comes up. White grabs the bishop pair, but it's kind of too late for him at this point. After rook takes f3, I believe I've seen the end of this game already, but black found some pretty nice tactics here. So how might you go about playing here?
Do I have b5 again? Yeah, b5.
Wow, so yeah, I guess b5 actually works here as well. That wasn't even what I was looking at, but yeah, b5 would win a bishop. In the game, he actually threw in this check. So how would you respond to this as white?
So, rook f2, bishop f2.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to play rook f2, then maybe he still has this b5 move, right?
Yeah, so I guess you sort of have to play bishop f2.
Yeah, bishop f2, but now black found a very, very tricky move that kind of won him the game.
g3.
Yeah, g3. It's pretty sick, right?
Also, I feel like
Yeah, so g3, and now, of course, what happens if bishop takes queen?
Isn't there, after rook f8, isn't there no way to stop rook h?
Yeah, there's simply no way to stop checkmate from happening on h1, unfortunately. So yeah, this was a pretty crazy game. It looks like in the game, white actually tried queen e2, which doesn't survive much longer after rook h8 anyways. Bishop takes queen, and rook h1. So yeah, what do you think about that game? There were a lot of mistakes made, but any questions about it? Anything you're still confused on? No? All right, well, let's just recap really quickly. So the big things that I would think the players can take away. One, white shouldn't really trade pieces like this unnecessarily. Two, they should really, grab the center while they can. White really should be playing d4 and stuff like c4 eventually here. Chess is all about the center, as Jonathan Schranz will tell you, since he's read a single book, or maybe even a single page out of a single book. That's all he needs to, be convinced of a new philosophy. Number two, something like d3 and b3. These moves don't really go well together, right? Because they simply weaken all of the dark squares on the queen side. And that's what led to those tactics that you saw with something like b5 coming eventually, where, already, the bishop is being lost. And then the third thing, I guess, is don't help your opponent's pawn storm like this. Obviously, when you castle on opposite sides, pawn storms are going to happen. So moving the bishop out to g5 is really not great.
Don't put pieces where it's not, don't put it in their territory where we can attack.
Yeah, that's another thing, is kind of don't overextend your pieces, I guess. Obviously this bishop's just going to get kicked around by these pawns. So, it's not really doing a whole lot for white's position. Okay, so that's that game. And very quickly, I'm going to try to go over a game from our very own Nick Risko that was played. He's here with us for the moment in the audience. So let's see if he has any explanations for himself. Looks like Evan Kelly, another club local, was playing white, and Nick was black. So we see d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7. So it's another King's Indian defense, actually. E3. So this is a more of a conservative way to play the opening, rather than fighting for all of these central squares. In d5, e5, c5. Like this, even f5. White says, I'm simply content with the squares I have. I'm going to play e3, defend this pawn one more time, and be sure that I can maintain my pawn center. Black went ahead and castled, bishop to d3. Both players are just developing. Queen c2 was played, which this move seems fine to me, honestly. Maybe better is just developing your last piece. Well, almost your last piece, but I don't know. Queen c2 seems okay. Yeah, so I think these are just lead chess annotations from the PGN Nick sent me. What's this guy's rating? I don't know. Nick, what is your rating these days?
About 1,300 over the board.
He's about 1,300, and Evan Kelly is like 17? 1,500. Evan Kelly's about 1,500. So, yeah, something like that, I think. Although, I feel like I've seen him before that. I don't know.
He's been playing for a while.
Anyways, so queen to c2.
I also saw him that he was unrated.
Yeah, but he's playing online.
Okay, so back to the game. Both players continue developing. Black actually went for the c5 move rather than e5. So Nick, any thoughts on that? Why'd you go for c5 over e5?
If pawn captures, knight captures, attacking the bishop. If pawn pushes, knight goes to e5, attacking the bishop. And
But,
pawn c4.
maybe best for white is just to let it sit, right? So,
Yeah, so if you let it sit, I'd be looking at trying to play b5, b4, and the pawn would be there to help support.
but what made you choose those plans over the plans that follow after e5?
Aren't you supposed to, isn't black supposed to attack on the
It just didn't seem right to try and push e5 and work for f5 with a more of an open center. with the pawn on e3 over e4.
Interesting.
Is it like
I don't know. I would have liked to see e5 here, I think.
does it isn't like when doesn't it matter which side your pawns are pointed, because like you could actually the f2 e2 e3 d4 pawn chain is pointing towards the queen side, so
Yeah.
it's c5, and the c7 d6 e5 things pawns pointing towards the king side.
Yeah, so if, black were to play e5, what you're saying is he should play on the king side, which is absolutely right. What I'm asking is, black can also play c5, which is what Nick did in the game. Then obviously his pawns point the other way. But, the choice between that, I don't think is too heavily influenced by, the way white's pawns are pointing. But, here I think, this move would have been good to see. And the reason I think that is because white didn't take this central space, right? So if black manages to take this central space, then that's actually going to be quite good for him. So if, maybe he just continues naturally, maybe he castles. Well, this never happened, right? You didn't play e5. Maybe something simple, like knight to e8 here. And, I mean, what does white want to do? Something like rook b1 could be simple, something like b3. And now I want to continue with f5, right? And I really want to fight for this central square. Because if my opponent's not going to take it, I want to take it myself. And probably something like f3 might be seen from the white player. And this is already weakening some dark squares. So definitely something to consider. This is another way of playing this opening. This is another kind of plan to go for. There's nothing inherently wrong with c5, though. So I think it's fine that you played that way. We saw white castle, rook to b8, aiming for b5, b3, a6, bishop b2, both players just developing, queen to c7, rook to c1. So black would like to play b5 here. But if white plays some nonchalant move, like rook a to d1, maybe b5 can already be coming through. Because after something like takes, Nick, you're showing me d takes, or c takes d, maybe knight takes d. And then actually, I guess,
Maybe you can't.
yeah, maybe white can recapture this pawn. If he were to recapture with the pawn, then, of course, black could take this because of this pin on the c file. If knight takes here, simply queen takes and rook takes. But OK, maybe knight takes d4, and, black couldn't play this anyways. Either way, rook a to c1 is a fine developing move. The game continued with knight h5. Maybe, yeah, e5 after knight takes, but okay, we continue with knight h5. This move, it made a lot of sense with the pawn on e4. It doesn't make quite as much sense with this pawn on e3, because this f4 square isn't really going to be a future home for the knight. It stops the white knight from coming to f4, but is that really a threat? I mean, what's white doing? Do you want to come into d5 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, maybe this is something to be concerned about, but I liked Stockfish's solution, as many people often do, which is just e6. And you're just controlling this central square, right? It's all a fight for the center in a lot of these openings. But okay, knight h5, it's not the worst move ever, and it does stop knight f4. It just kind of sidelines your knight, which is something you usually try to avoid. Knight d5 comes, queen to d8, defending the pawn, rook f d1, knight d to f6. Yeah, I don't know.
Because then
Maybe still this e6 move, right? Makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think Stockfish actually said after knight takes f6, white has tricks with taking the g6 pawn with the bishop.
Really?
I'm trying to remember the line.
I don't think you can take this pawn.
D takes c.
D takes c? Okay. Oh, and then, yeah, if d takes c, bishop takes g6, yeah. I guess this is kind of awkward. Yeah, so I wasn't even thinking tactically, but I guess that's another reason not to play this move. But yeah, I would have liked d6 here. Again, really just getting this knight out of your face, and then maybe repositioning this queen to get off of this file with the rook. But okay, we saw knight f6. D takes c5 was played first. You inserted knight takes d5. Probably you were afraid of, bishop takes g6 kind of stuff, right?
Didn't see it at all.
Well, yeah, but, unconsciously maybe you were afraid of these discoveries. I'll give it to you. We saw bishop takes g7 and knight takes e3. So got kind of a weird desperado here. I wonder why, what happens if white just takes this knight back?
He's up a pawn.
Yeah, now it just seems like he's winning, right? There's no way to regain this pawn, really.
Can you move your hand?
Wait, is there like after rook takes, is there queen d6?
Yeah, so maybe rook takes isn't actually the most accurate, because something like queen d6 might be fine. Again, if you're going to take this pawn, though, I'm going to have some tricks, right?
If rook takes c5, can't you play b6?
Yeah, b6 is the same thing, right? b6, I'm still just going to move.
Well, after queen d6, isn't it not the same thing? Because doesn't it, white have b4?
Okay, yeah, maybe he would have b4 there, but, I mean, rook c1 is fine. This is just still winning for white, because you can't take this pawn.
Oh, yeah.
But, okay. So yeah, I guess that means bishop g7 is just not a great move. Knight takes e3 was kind of crazy.
It's the only way to keep material even.
But yeah, this knight b4 move was suggested, and this looks pretty good, I think. If queen c3, maybe I'm taking on d3.
Wait, doesn't knight takes e3 do the same thing? Doesn't it like both attack the queen?
Both attack the queen.
Yeah, but this gives you the option to take on d3, I think, which is slightly different. I don't know. This is all kind of tactics. Let's just go through it. So knight e3, fe3, knight takes g7. Kind of a weird desperado. C takes d6, aiming to clarify the central pawn situation. Queen takes d6, which seems like it should run into tactics, although maybe it doesn't.
Because bishop takes b6 doesn't work.
Well, yeah, bishop g6 doesn't work because of queen g6. But, I mean, he has other options here, right?
You might have bishop f5.
Yeah, bishop f5, but maybe even bishop takes f5 there and the queen's hit. Maybe there aren't any tactics, but, black does have to be careful. We see knight g3. f5 gets played. Yeah, so once again, you really want to just step off this file, right? Why put yourself through all this pain and suffering? So again, now bishop takes f5 does work. Bishop takes f5, knight f5, queen e5, and now knight h6, and already things are looking a little hairy.
After queen e5, white had rook to e5.
Rook d5 here?
Yeah, rook d5.
Yeah, this is another move. The queen would have to move again, but I don't know if it makes a huge difference. Let's continue with knight h6, king h8, knight g4, queen g5, queen e4, simply centralizing, rook f5, queen d4. Yeah, maybe it's better just to get this rook in. Just activate your pieces. That's usually something you want to do.
But isn't there, if you put rook there, you have h5.
What does h5 do?
Kicks the knight away so you can play rook e5.
I mean, I have like queen f4, right? I don't know. I just activate your pieces, right? You're kind of getting bogged down in specific lines, but if you activate your pieces, usually things turn out all right, right? I mean, just queen f4 here. But okay, maybe, white was afraid of this line, so he plays queen d4, but this really just shuts out your own pieces, right? You want to get the rooks in the game. h5 was played anyways. Knight just back to f2. Rook a f8, attacking the knight. So knight h3, which again kind of sidelines the knight. I guess he's trying to come into f4, but central squares are very nice. So knight h3, queen h6, e4. Okay. Rook f1 check, and then that's the end of the game.
Black resigns.
Yeah, so rook f1 might have just been a miscalculation. I guess it was a blitz game, right? It was a fast game.
Could recapture. It was I saw rook f1.
Oh, you saw
rook
some
F1,
queen
king
c1
F1,
stuff,
c.
and then yeah, it doesn't quite work though. It just hangs a rook. Yeah, maybe the game would continue with something like this.
Queen f6 was
Yeah, so I don't know. Moral of that story, I guess, is just keep in mind that e5 plan for black, and then really just why keep your pieces on loose squares like that queen on d6. You just want to get your pieces onto safe squares, and you want to activate your pieces from the white point of view. That's something he kind of missed out on, was just not activating his pieces. Any other questions about what happened in that game? Anything you were kind of confused about?
The queen f4 move earlier with white protecting the pawn and rook to e5. I think we were talking about.
Yeah, so I mean, rook d7, h5. Rook e5. It looks like he has queen f4 here. Maybe I'm missing something, but this looks fine.
Yeah, that looks all right.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to get your pieces in the game, right? That's something to always keep in mind. With that, I think I'm going to call it here. So thank you guys for watching. This is the first viewer's choice I think I've done in a couple years. I think the first class I did was actually back on one of my first days at the club. So it's fun to be filling in again, doing this once again. And thank you guys for watching.